The military basics are these incredibly valuable things, these satellites on which our Defense Department is so dependent for the bombs where they land, for the ships where they go, for the drones that are operated. They were put up there in an era when they were judged to be safe. But if you think about it, they're hopelessly weak and vulnerable. They're fragile. It costs a lot of money to launch things into space. You can't put armor on them. Something hitting armor at 22,000 miles an hour doesn't do very much for it. Um, they're traveling at incredible speeds in near Earth orbit, and that puts them in danger all the time, along with all the increasing debris. There is the other reality that you know exactly where they're going to be. If you're going to shoot at them, they're not hiding. There is an orbit that is cataloged, and all of our adversaries keep track of it, and everyone knows exactly where they are. And although the U.S. government spent billions on this a couple of years ago, you can't camouflage them. You can't paint them black, you know, or put the uniforms on like Space Force on Netflix. You know, there's no good camouflage for space. They're difficult, essentially impossible to hide. And you can put passive defenses in. You can have them with the power to maneuver, but the fuel costs money to go up, and it also runs out. And so every satellite's not capable of maneuver. In fact, most aren't. You can set up little guardian satellites around, which our Defense Department is experimenting with, and there are different things, but it's difficult to protect the satellite from ever more interested aggressors. And down on Earth, you've got all of these things that cyber and electronic can mess with, because you've got uplinks and downlinks, and you've got controls going back and forth between the tracking sites and relay stations. And the Iranians have got pretty clever also, even though the signals for controlling the satellites is encrypted. The code is encrypted, but there's a phrase called meaconing, a new phrase entering the parlance in this area, which is to intercept encrypted information that the Americans are sending their satellites, keep it, and then beam it later to the satellite to confuse it because it's getting a message that is telling it to do something that the U.S. doesn't want it to have. There's so many ways to mess with the satellites. Bandwidth for encrypted transmissions is small. This is a big set of vulnerabilities. And the threats are growing for the high power microwaves and chemical sprayers and radio frequency jammers and kinetic kill vehicles of all sorts of varieties, lasers, other aspects of the electromagnetic spectrum, and of course, robotic mechanisms. So the threats are growing, they're vulnerable, they're essential to our national defense. So what are you going to do? Well, law is going to be continue. Law and the treaties are going to continue to be one of the only ways that we can get to a point where perhaps some amount of safety can be improved.